Viserys Targaryen here, and I just wanted you to know, Christmas is coming.
All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about Ned and Ashara for the Winds of Winter event. And I think a lot of you are probably going to be a little bit surprised I'm even talking about this theory. But again, I think I would feel wrong if I did a Winds of Winter theory kind of event and I didn't talk about one of the more popular theories. I don't know if it's more popular, but it's one that's been talked about a decent amount on YouTube. And it's the Ned and Ashara equals Jon theory. This one is really heavily put up and put into the community because of Order of the Green Hand. So I will leave a link down to their series of this. If you guys wanted to check them out more in detail, they have a much longer series on this theory. And in this theory, I think a lot of you, especially the fans, people that have been, you know, watching me for a lot longer, know this is not a theory that I subscribe to. I actually have a couple problems with this theory, but we're not going to talk about those in today's video. I don't want this to be like a let's try to debate the theory. I really want to just explore the theory in this video, put it out there, and because maybe, you know, some people like this theory and it'll kind of be a nice jumping point to go to people that talk about it more. And also, I just felt like it needed to be talked about in this event, as it is probably the only alternative theory to Jon's parentage that I can even see some like weight in. But yeah, we're going to go through it a little bit, talk about some of the reasons, and yeah, and then tomorrow's video, we'll talk about R+L, we'll talk about all the reasons I believe in that theory, and all that. So let's get into this theory. So this theory mainly comes from a couple quotes that are littered throughout the series. A couple of them are from Catelyn herself. So the first real indication and quotes that a lot of people like to use when it comes to Ned and Ashara is there is this idea that Ned calls Jon a son. He calls him and Robb a son in Bran 1, the second chapter of the story. The quote goes, "Come, let us see what mischief my sons have rooted out now." He sent his horse into a trot. So again, if you're someone that believes in Ned and Ashara, you believe that, wow, okay, Ned just admitted that Jon is his son. So that's kind of like the first little piece of evidence that we get in the very introductory chapter with Bran. Now, that's an interesting point as well, as we kind of leap into another aspect. And again, I'm just saying, if you guys want to put in the comments what you guys think these actually mean, or how you would say that maybe they don't actively represent the argument of N+A, go ahead and do that in the comments. I have my own reasoning. I'm just not going to talk about it in this. So if you think I'm kind of brushing past some of the opposition to a lot of these quotes that I've talked about in the past in other videos, that's why. Again, I don't want to make this a huge, long video, and also I just kind of want to hit the actual side for N+A. But moving on, we get another quote from Catelyn that is also very interesting, because this is her recounting kind of her early days with Ned when they came back to Winterfell right after Robert's Rebellion. Ned comes back with this bastard child, and there's a lot of rumors going on. Ned's soldiers seem to be implying that Ashara is the mother of this child and who Ned slept with. So again, that's a little bit relevant when we look at, okay, some of the people around Ned believe that he was Ashara, so that could possibly be leading to that idea. And so this eventually gets to Catelyn, and this is the quote that we get from Catelyn. Catelyn had asked her husband the truth of it, asked him to his face. That was the only time in all their years that Ned had ever frightened her. "Never ask me about Jon," he said, cold as ice. "He is my blood, and that is all you need to know. And now I will know where you heard that name, my lady." She had pledged to obey, she told him, and from that day on, the whispering had stopped, and Ashara Dayne's name was never heard in Winterfell again. So again, this is very much set to imply, for the N+A argument, that Ned had a very important relationship with Ashara. He gets cold as ice. He seems to frighten Catelyn because of this being brought up. And also, he does admit that Jon is his blood, whether that's as his son or something else. For this theory, we go with that means his son. And again, why would Ned want Ashara's name to stop being named? Now, the first part of this is because when you given the rumor and you think about what's going on here, people are basically calling Ashara Ned's side hoe, more or less. It paints a really bad picture of Ashara. But the other part of that's going to be, okay, in this theory, Ashara and Ned had a very loving relationship. In this theory, it goes further than that. They actually were married at one point. So that's all things that you don't want to be coming out, especially if you don't want people knowing that Jon is Ashara's. You're not going to want these rumors to keep going. But something I find a little bit interesting is when we look at this idea that Tyrion brings up, silencing people is only going to make that theory more damning. I find that a little interesting, but that could be a nice little relevant argument you put to this as well. So as we continue going throughout the story, we come to the next one, which is brought to you by Cersei and Ned's talk, one of the most famous chapters of the story. And again, in this quote, Cersei is basically throwing every rumor that she's heard of about Ned and how he slept with this woman out of wedlock. And she notably brings up Ashara Dayne and talks about how Ashara Dayne killed herself, how Ned took her child, killed her brother, did all these things, again, painting Ned as this not honorable person. But why this is relevant to the N+A argument is that Cersei believes, to at least some capacity, that it was Ashara. And again, she was hearing these rumors from other people, which again could lead to maybe this has some water. If she's hearing it this amount of times to believe that there is a chance Ashara is the person that is Ned's lover, especially back then, all of this is possible, right? It leads to this idea that Ashara could be this character. And then when we even get this a little bit further, now Ned Dayne, when Arya meets him, does not straight up say that Ashara is Jon's mother. He actually implies that Wyla, the wet nurse, was Jon's mother. But what he does confirm is that from hearing from his relatives that Ned and Ashara were in love. And that's interesting evidence coming from the Dayne family themselves. And let's also think about something else. Why is Ned Dayne named after Ned? As the theory goes, this is really because Ned and Ashara were in love. Ned was someone that married her. And if you even go further than that, if Ashara is in hiding, he helped hide her child. So there's a lot there as to if this is the truth, N+A, as to why Ned would be named after him. And so all of this kind of has a nice little bow to it on face value. If you even go further, Barristan also implies in Dance that Ashara and Ned may have had something because they danced together at Harrenhal, which kind of leads us to our next little point of this is the story of the Night of the Laughing Tree. We get this idea that Brandon Stark introduced Ashara and Ned, and the two ended up dancing. This could have been the start of their nice blooming relationship. We're just not sure, but this is where the theory kind of goes. Now, the theory, I think after this point, is very hard to follow. You kind of have to put a lot of connecting dots, so I'll try my best to explain it in the best way I understand it. If I get some of it wrong, or if there's some details that maybe you think I should have added. Again, it's a very long part of the Order of the Green Hand. Theory is kind of tracking where everyone goes after Harrenhal, which I think for most theories around Robert's Rebellion is the hardest thing to do. But as the theory goes, Ned and Ashara, at some point, again, started seeing each other. Because, again, we don't really have book evidence of this, but we're going off of trying to conclude certain characters and putting some pieces together that Ashara would have accompanied Elia to Dragonstone. Again, Ashara was one of Elia's handmaidens or women around her. And so you could make the argument that Elia would have had Ashara at Dragonstone. And why this is important is because Dragonstone is very close to Goldtown. And this is kind of the area that Ned would have been at in the Vale and the Eyrie. And so the two possibly could have communicated, met up pretty quickly. It's not that far of a boat ride. It's not a very far journey for either one of them to have made. And so this all could have been going on and makes a lot of logical sense. This could have maybe happened, especially when you get this idea that both of them, they were not promised to anyone. And this possibly could have been a match that made sense. Ned at this point was not going to inherit Winterfell. He actually wasn't set to inherit really anything. So him marrying into the Daynes could have made a lot of sense. And we see, given that the Starks were trying to make a lot of marriages south, strengthening up those bonds, a marriage with the Dornish maybe wouldn't have been the worst idea. We don't know, though, how far this went. We don't know if Ned ever told his father, ever brought this up. We're not sure. Going off of this theory, it would seem as though the two met up a few times and we're getting to that point. But everything kind of culminates when we get to Brandon Stark being basically imprisoned at King's Landing. All this stuff with the duel going on. Or this duel between Littlefinger going on and whatever happened following that. We know that Ned goes back to the Vale, but what happens with Ashara? Was Ashara going to come to this wedding with Brandon and Catelyn? Was that the plan? We don't know, right? It's never said what was going on. We don't know anything about Ashara's movements, right? We know that she was with Elia again early, on before the war started, and then we know she ends up in Starfall. We don't know how she got anywhere. There's no book evidence really to suggest it. So all of this is kind of trying to connect the dots, given personality, given where characters possibly could have been. We know where Ned was. We don't know where Ashara was. We can imply it, but we don't know. And so the next part of this we know is that Elia did not have Ashara in King's Landing. And there's a number of reasons as to why you could theorize that this was the case. I won't go into them all because some of them do not really support this theory. But the idea here would be, okay, if Ashara was getting married, that could be something in which Elia would, release her from her servitude, I guess, or her being at court, I guess. I think there's some other reasons that I won't talk about in this video, but yeah, for going on with this theory, it would make sense. So the theory goes that, again, Ashara and Ned going to the Vale, they go to the Vale, and then from the Vale, because Ned then has to go north, she goes with him. We get some things maybe here and there that maybe would imply it. We get to the sisters on their journey up north, and there is this rumor of a fisherman's daughter, which maybe could be implying that this was Ashara. Maybe just as time went on, the rumors got a little muddied, and it turned into this fisherman's daughter type character. But again, long story short, Ned and Ashara make it to the north. Now, again, none of this is confirmed. We don't have any actual sightings of Ashara in the north or in the Vale. Again, kind of making some stretches here to kind of fit the theory. But going forward, it's said that at White Harbor, Ned and Ashara marry. Now, this is also would be around the time where it would seem logical that Ned and Ashara would sleep together to have Jon. And this is, again, kind of where the theory, we have to kind of imply where certain factions go. We know Ned is eventually going to go south and start going into the war. Where does Ashara go? That's the interesting point of this. Where does she go? So the theory goes that Ashara eventually just ends up back at Starfall. She's not going to be in the war campaign. You don't want that relationship public, especially when Ned is kind of coming to this realization as war is starting. He's probably going to need to make an alliance with someone, probably Catelyn at this point. And now you could make the argument as well as why does Ned go into Ashara's arms, as in marrying or having a child? You could imply that, again, Ned has just lost his brother and his father. His sister is missing, presumably captured by Rhaegar. He is in a position right now where he is very low on family members. He's at a very low point. His head is being called. Basically his brother and Robert's is being called for. It's not a great point. And so a lot of that mental turmoil could lead him into Ashara's arms, given that she is in the north and still with him. But Ned then goes down south. And we know that he eventually ends up marrying Catelyn. So the thing we have to think about here is, did Ned annul the marriage to Ashara, or did he marry Catelyn even though he was already married? And then when he sees her the next time, he tells her that that marriage is over. There's an interesting part of that theory that we just don't know. We are not really certain as to how any of that would have worked, given that this argument is the one that makes the most amount of sense. So, with that being said, what ends up happening? Well, Ned goes to Starfall, and he comes back. After going to Dorne, the Tower of Joy, the Starfall area, there's a child. Now, with this theory that this is Ashara's child. Now, there's a couple things, right? I feel like a lot of Ned and Ashara supporters are not as keen or sure as to where Ashara went. Some believe that she's in the neck with Howland Reed. Others believe she's this character of Septa Lamore. Others are not even sure that it is Jon who it is her child. Could it be young Griff instead? Maybe that's why Septa Lamore, who could be Ashara, has such a tie to this young Griff character. But that is kind of the journey of Ashara. But there's some other evidence that also we need to look at. Jon looks exactly like Ned. Is that something that implies that Ned is the father, just based upon their looks? But it goes even further than that, as in Ned and Jon, personality-wise, are pretty similar. Jon is kind of known as this quiet wolf-type character. He has a lot of the same mannerisms as Ned. Ghost himself does not howl, really. He's not as noisy as someone like Greywind or Summer. All of this does seem similar to a character like Ned. So, what would this imply, right? If Ned and Ashara were the true parents of Jon, what is that relevance? So let's even go back further. Let's say that actually Catelyn and Ned's marriage was never legit because Ashara and Ned were still married. That would actually make Jon the true heir of Winterfell, and actually that all of Catelyn's children were the actual bastards. It'd be a nice little play and twist on that story. So all of this happens, and Ned and Ashara, they get revealed in Winds of Winter or Dream of Spring. It would give Jon the legitimate claim to Winterfell with Robb's will and other things like that, and Howland Reed maybe confirming this story or not. And also will give him a claim to the sword Dawn, which could be the implied Lightbringer, as it does produce light. Dawn is a sword that was basically made out of a star, or came out of a star, something like that. I'm not as proficient in the Dayne history, but it would be a little interesting. It would maybe make Jon this Azor Ahai type figure. So that's my best attempt at the Ned and Ashara theory. Again, it's not the theory that I support the most. I tried to be as positive and tried to be as logical as I could with this theory without bringing in my own bias, because I do have my own bias against this theory. So again, it's not going to be perfect, but I tried my best. And again, if you guys have your own arguments against parts of this theory, if you guys like this theory, let me know. I know it's a very passionate community for people that like this theory as well as for R+L. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.